Guys, welcome to the podcast. This is going to be an episode from the summer of 2017. My friend Brian Rimzsa went Dall sheep hunting with Arctic Red River Outfitters and covered a lot of the all of the aspects of his travel, his prep, his gear prep, food, the hunt itself. Anybody going Dall sheep hunting, this is a great episode. I thought I would bring it back. Before we get into that episode, guys, I want to thank the sponsors of this podcast. I want to thank GoHunt.com Gear Shop, my friend Cody Nelson of 20 plus years. He is the optics manager there. You can call Cody directly for info and sales on any optics, binoculars, tripods, spotting scopes, anything to do with glassing. Reach out at 702-847-8747. That's extension 2, or email him directly at optics@gohunt.com. Remember that there is a July promotional drawing, and if you spend $12, you get 12 entries into this drawing. If you spend $2,000, you get $2,000 entered into this drawing. So dollar for dollar entry. All you got to do is use the JScott19 promo code when you either purchase something from the Go Hunt Gear Shop online, or when you call Cody, tell him you want to be in the drawing for the JScott 19 drawing, and it's a $1,000 Go Hunt Gear Shop gift card. So for the month of July, there's a $1,000 gift card giveaway. All you have to do is purchase to be entered into the drawing. I want to thank them for their sponsorship. I also want to remind you guys that the Go Hunt Insider, there is a 30-day free trial going on right now. All you've got to do is go to www.gohunt.com/jscott, follow the prompts, and you'll be able to view and access the Insider. You'll be able to look at all of the draw odds for all the different states, all the different animals, and you'll be able to see what it's all about to be an Insider member. It's a 30-day free trial. Go check it out. I also want to thank Kuiu Ultralight Hunting. That's the gear that I wear on all my hunts. You can find out more. Go to Kuiu, that's KUIU.com. Thanks to Kuiu for their sponsorship. Also, phonescope.com. Use the JScott19 promo code. You're going to get a 10% discount off all orders. That is the digiscoping device that I use on my iPhone 10. And onxmaps.com. Go to onxmaps.com, use the JScott19 promo code, and you're going to get a 20% discount on all orders. Guys, let's get right to this episode. I'm going to roll out several from the last couple years, Dall sheep preparation podcasts and hunt podcasts. So with Dall sheep hunting season coming up here in about a week to 10 days, I thought this would be a good thing to refresh. So thanks for all your support. You can follow me at JScott Outdoors on Instagram, or send me an email if you have any questions, or a direct message. Send me an email at jscottoutdoors@gmail.com. Guys, thanks for your support. Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we have Brian Rimzsa, my friend who just got back from 22 days in the Northwest Territories hunting the McKenzie Mountains. Brian was able to harvest a awesome Dall sheep and a mountain caribou, and I'm excited to have Brian here on the podcast to talk about his adventure. We've had him on the podcast before and had really good feedback from it. So Brian, let's have some fun. How you doing, man?
I'm good, Jay. I'm good. Glad to be home. It was a long trip, longest trip I've ever been on, and it was a great trip. Everything went very well, and obviously success helps, make trips even better. But everyone on the trip that was there, even guys I didn't know, were successful. So it was just a really awesome adventure.
Yeah, for sure. Before your hunt, I kept trying to get times coordinated between the two of us with our schedules to go over some of your gear list and some of the things you were taking, and we weren't able to do that. But fortunately, we can talk to you now about all the gear that you and all the prep and everything that you did to try and make the hunt a success, and then maybe what was some of the things that stood out as a real positive, and then maybe some things that you would do differently now that you've gone on your first quote unquote mountain hunt, backpacking style hunt in the Northwest Territory. So it's going to be fun. Why don't we just start out by talking about, how you booked your hunt with Arctic Red River, how that came about, and then you can just dive kind of right into your travel plans and how everything unfolded.
Yeah, well, I booked a trip to the Northwest Territories to hunt the Mackenzie Mountains for Dall sheep and mountain caribou with a friend of mine, Mike Jones from Phoenix. We worked together, been friends together, shoot tournaments together. And initially, we booked the trip in 2014, and we booked with a different outfit, but things changed, and we had to kind of scramble back in December to find a new place to go. And in doing so, a lot of the recommendations from some very experienced mountain hunters like Cam Foss and some other individuals. I talked to Brendan Burns and, got some different recommendations. Ultimately led me to Tavis Molinar with Arctic Red River Outfitters. And, looking back, that was probably just meant to be, and it was a good choice, and it really worked out well. And, I couldn't be happier with our overall decision of going there and, hunting with Arctic Red. It was kind of a hectic time because obviously we had to make arrangements to change everything with about 6-7 months to go, which made things a little more difficult, but it's all worked out in the end. Arctic Red is in the Northwest Territories. This is way up in the northwest corner, about an hour. The base camp's about an hour out of Norman Wells, and the Northwest Territories pretty much encompasses the Mackenzie Mountains, and there are 5 or 6 different operations that hunt in the Mackenzie Mountains, and those operations are most of which are helicopter operations. So they'll either fly you to the top of the mountain and you set up your camp there, and they use the helicopters to help move you around and also get your animals out, which is very helpful and beneficial. Travis's operation is a backpack hunt. I mean, you're flown in a Super Cub, dropped off, and wherever you want to go is based on where you hike yourself to, and you're dropped off in the bottom, and the creek bottoms is where the landing strips are at, and you work your way through, and you got to hike yourself to the top of the mountain and get things done. But everything Tavis promised, and to me, in booking this, he lived up to my expectations. There were never any issues. His planning was spot on and exceptional, and I have 0 complaints about the operation and Tavis and his guides and his whole outfit.
Brian, I've been able to see some of the pictures from your adventure, and the country, for sure, the sheep country, it doesn't look near as thick as I thought it was going to be. Like the bottoms didn't look that thick. Some of the first kind of initial questions I'd had, and I think it's really cool that you and I have exchanged texts back and forth. You were texting me quite a bit during the hunt and what have you, but I actually haven't talked to you. So kind of all this is fresh to me as it is to the listener. But talk about the country, actually, where you were dropped off, and how the pictures make it look pretty open.
Yeah, it is real open. I think that one of the things that you had a big question about was kind of how thick it was, and if you had to do a bunch of brush busting to get kind of up into the mountains. And the benefit of being so far north in the Northwest Territories is that nightmare of brush busting through the alders and stuff that you and Dall experienced on your goat hunt, you don't have that issue in the NWT. I mean, there was no what I would consider brush busting at all. There are some places where like the willows are thicker, down along the creek bottoms and stuff here and there, but my experience on my hunt, I didn't have anything that I would consider brush busting at all. You basically utilize the creek bottoms to get everywhere you wanted to go, and then you hiked out of the creek bottoms to get up on the mountains, because obviously the sheep, you want to get high and get up above them is the goal, to spot them from above so that you can kind of make a game plan, because most of us know that trying to make a game plan on sheep from below is a difficult thing. One of the recommendations I had during my hunt because the intention was to kill a sheep with my bow, was to go kind of mid to later in the season, because the weather would change and it would help push the rams kind of down off of the extreme peaks and kind of into some more accessible country to hunt. And I would say that was definitely the case. The particular ram that I had killed had been hunted by two other hunters prior to me getting there, and things just obviously didn't work out for those hunters. I know the second hunter that hunted him sat on him for 4 to 5 days, and he was on just a very extreme peak to where you might have been able to get a bullet in him, but it was going to be a disaster with the recovery, and he may have taken quite the tumble if it wasn't, depending on where he was shot. And so they opted to go look for a different ram and hunt a different location. And, it worked out to my benefit, because obviously then I got a chance to pursue him. They actually had nicknamed him before I got there. They nicknamed the ram that I killed Curly, which obviously is a fitting sheep name. You have some experience with a ram name. And so I thought it was kind of cool that that's what they had called him, but it was no part of me naming him. It was all named before I got there. But the country is, the elevation's not very high. I think base camp is somewhere around like 1,000 feet. And even at the top of the mountains you're topped out at like 6,000, 6,500. So elevation was never an issue, and I didn't even realize that kind of in my preparation. I thought the elevation would be more of an issue, but you're starting out basically at sea level. So elevation wasn't an issue. The country consists of, pretty intense mountains that some parts of the mountains are covered with kind of like tundra-type grass, and then other parts are that black shale, and you've got your cliffs. And in order to get around up at Arctic Red, there's 2 Super Cubs in camp, along with another plane at 206, which is a little bigger, and then there's a float plane. We utilized the Super Cub, and I landed in a gravel bar in the bottom of a creek that came off of the Arctic Red River itself, and we hiked up that bottom about 5 miles on day 1 and set up our camp and began glassing. I mean, when I walked off the plane, my guide, Ryan Johnson from the Edmonton area, he's I think he was 27 years old. He'd been guiding for Arctic Red for 5 years, and I believe my ram was the 25th ram that he had killed, or guided, I should say. And, he was very knowledgeable, knew the area, had a lot of bow hunting experience, which was exciting for me, because obviously things take bow hunting is a little different requirement. And Ryan and I hit it off right away. I mean, Ryan was looking at a legal ram when I got off the plane, and it was a broomed ram on one side, but we had no intentions of hunting it. It was very clear that Ryan wanted to kill Curly, and I was totally good with that. I mean, he showed me a video of Curly when I got off the plane, and I didn't have any. There was no arguments on my part trying to kill that ram.
That's awesome. Why don't we back up just a sec and talk a little bit about your travel arrangements, and then walk through that, where things that you would maybe do differently as you're telling the story, and then let's just dive into kind of day 1 and just start going through everything that happened.
Yeah, when you book with Arctic Red, Tavis sends you a 13-page packet that's very informative. I mean, things are very well broken down. My hunt dates were August 21st to September 7th, and that's more than obviously 15 days, but Tavis allows for 2 days travel on the front and 2 days travel on the back. So when he says you're getting 15 days of hunting, you're getting 15 days of hunting. And that was kind of refreshing, because sometimes you get a 15-day hunt and you end up losing 2 days to travel. But that's not how Tavis runs the operation. And, so he sends you that packet. It has all the information you need. He tells you when he needs you in Norman Wells and when you can expect to return to Norman Wells. And he provides you everything that you need to kind of book your hunt and know what you need to do. So a couple of things that I did, just being on travel before and knowing things, is that when I looked to book my flights, the option was, in order to get to Edmonton, because that's where ideally you want to fly out of, the option was that to either go through Seattle or go through LA. Well, I'd been through LA before as a hunter, and it's just not as convenient, so I opted to go through Seattle, and that proved to be pretty beneficial because people in Seattle were just easy to deal with. They've dealt with hunters, and they've dealt with guns, and it was not an issue at all. So I flew with Alaska Airlines up to Phoenix to Seattle, Seattle to Edmonton, and we spent the night in Edmonton at a hotel there that Tavis had recommended, and it was very reasonable and inexpensive. There's a shuttle that picks you up from the hotel, or from the airport to you to the hotel. The next morning, we flew out from Edmonton to Yellowknife to Norman Wells, which is on a different airline, but it's affiliated with Alaskan Airlines. So that was all one trip type deal. It's pretty slick. And once you arrive in Norman Wells, it's about 12:30, 1 o'clock. At the same time when you arrive in Edmonton. So you arrive midday, and I kind of set it up that way because I figured if for some reason we lost bags or anything like that, we would have enough time to acquire those bags if need be. I stayed at the NISTU Hotel, which is a recommendation of Tavis. It was the most inexpensive one, but it was nice enough, and they had a good food right there in the hotel, so it was good. And they had freezers on the way back for you to put your meat in, and it was just, they were totally in tune with dealing with hunters. In Norman Wells, you stay at the Heritage Hotel, and when you stay at the Heritage Hotel, it's basically the only option in Norman Wells, and it's pretty pricey because you're pretty much limited to that's it. But it was good. They had everything you needed. They had a restaurant there you could eat at, so I mean it was not a bad place to stay at all. And then they had a storage room where you could basically downgrade your hard cases, downgrade all your stuff, and only take from Norman Wells. You only flew out with your backpack with your gear, and you carried your rifle on the plane, or you carried your bow or both on the plane.
And that's from Norman Wells to the base camp?
Yeah.
So in essence, they let you store your stuff there.
Right. They let you store your stuff there, and that's all set up through Tavis. So it was easy. The airplane ride from Norman Wells to base camp, I just paid Tavis for, so I didn't have to deal with any of the money, and it's all set up. When you get off the plane in Norman Wells, the people from Northright Air meet you there. They drive you to the hotel, and they tell you, look, we'll be here at 8:30 in the morning to pick you guys up, be ready to go, and they were punctual and ready to go, and we flew out of Norman Wells on a Twin Otter. So, I mean, we had 4 guys with our gear, and then we had like 1,000 pounds of fuel and a whole bunch of other gear that we flew in with because it's a pretty large plane. And from Norman Wells to base camp, it's only an hour plane ride, 45 minutes to an hour plane ride, so it's pretty short. And Tavis's base camp is nestled right there on the edge of the Arctic Red River, and nice landing strip, nice cabins and everything like that. And we'll get into the cabins and things like that more and kind of the accommodations. But that was the travel. I guess one of the things that I had planned to take my own food, and then at the last minute I kind of like chickened out on some of the stuff because I didn't want to pay for an extra bag or an overweight bag fee, which is kind of silly in the aspect of like the trip is not exactly cheap. And, to spend an extra $75 for a bag over 50 pounds is not really a big deal.
In essence,
but it was fine.
You could pack 50 pounds worth of everything you ever wanted and have a little bit of, have exactly what you want for $75, and you chose to not do that, and it ended up you didn't have everything you absolutely wanted.
Right. It wasn't a huge issue at all. Like, Tavis provided a lot of things, but for Alaskan Airlines, it's $50 for an extra bag if it's under 50 pounds, and $75 for a bag that's over 50 pounds. So, I mean, I could have either taken an extra bag or I could have just overloaded one of my bags, and it wouldn't have mattered. And it was minimal. The amount of money was super minimal. And the other thing is that you have basically a whole, 8 to 10 hours in Edmonton, and Edmonton's a huge city. So, we actually went to Walmart and to a sporting goods store, and, you could have purchased anything you wanted there. If you didn't want to fly with it, you could have purchased it there and then just paid for an extra bag going from Edmonton to Norman Wells.
Right.
So, but it worked out fine. It was just funny. My logic and my thinking about it was kind of silly because I had all my stuff already packed and ready to go, and I just at the last second kind of decided I didn't want to pay the extra bag fee, which was silly in the grand scheme because it was a very minimal amount of money when you're talking about the overall part of the hunt.
Yeah, and you actually put quite a bit of time into bringing, figuring out all your own food. So you didn't take any of your own food?
No, I took a bunch of my own Mountain House meals. I took like a trail mix that I had put together, and then I took a bunch of my own candy bars, and I took my own Cliff bars, and my own coffee and my own drink, things of that nature.
Gotcha.
But what I didn't take, there's no real way to take cheese leaving from Phoenix when it's 107 degrees. So I know like Jason Harrison recommends cheese squares and stuff like that. And I would have loved to have had them, but there's no real way to do that. So you'd have to buy that in Edmonton just because the temperature in the plane, I wouldn't want to keep cheese at 100 degrees in the belly of a plane. And then the other thing that I kind of gave up on was like bringing like chips or something like that, and I would have liked to have had some sort of like a salted chip or a cheese or something like that. It would have been nice to have when you were there. But those are also things that you could have purchased just right there in Edmonton without any issue.
Gotcha. Okay, so...
And then as far as go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
As far as traveling, like, you always hear horror stories of people traveling. I traveled with my Studio Icon Pro 7200. I took the lid off and put it in the bag, but I wore my hunting boots, which obviously is kind of a pain going through security, but one thing I don't want to go on a sheep hunt without is my boots. And I had a pair of, solid color hunting pants, and I had a shirt, and I took my rain gear with me and my optics with me with me on the plane at all times. Like, I didn't gate check it or anything. I always had it with me, and my goal there was, like, if something happened where bags got lost, I knew I had enough gear to go hunting. And it wasn't an issue, but I was glad to have it. A couple things that I wouldn't travel with is don't bring your trekking poles in your carry-on bag because they won't let you take them because they consider them a weapon. So make sure you check them in your checked baggage. And obviously you can't fly with any fuel canisters, but Tavis has all that stuff to provide to you. And the other thing is that when you fly from Edmonton to Norman Wells, they were concerned about having bug spray with DEET in it. So if you have bug spray with DEET in it, it may be wise maybe not to mention that. Because as everyone knows, bug spray with DEET is the only thing that works. And like for your hunt, on the early season hunt, we didn't have any bug issues, but on your hunt in that early season, you're going to want good bug spray.
Right. So for the listeners out there, I'm going in 2018. I believe it's July 15th through the 25th or something like that, 14th through the 24th or, dates like that in mid-July of 18. And it's the first hunt at Arctic Red River where, Brian, I believe you went on the third hunt at Arctic Red River. So you're saying you didn't have bugs at all, but everyone's saying the first hunt, definitely there will be bugs.
Yeah, we had bugs a little bit here and there, but nothing that was required any sort of bug spray or anything like that. The only time that bugs were even remotely a little bit annoying was actually in base camp because it's much lower in elevation and the weather is much warmer.
Gotcha. So can you check DEET in your bag? You just don't have to mention that you have DEET? Is that what you're saying? Technically,
you can't have checked DEET in your bag. So if you have it, you probably should just say you don't have it. If that's the case.
And then
the other thing.
What's the option of getting DEET if for whatever reason it got confiscated or what have you? Would you ship it early ahead of time or what would you do?
Yeah, I mean, that's the only way that I know of you can get it there is to ship it there ahead of time, and I don't know why it was such a concern. The other thing is like, these were only the concerns for Canadian North, which was that's the airline that flies you from Edmonton to Norman Wells. You could carry on a lighter in your bag, in your carry-on, but you couldn't have a lighter in your checked bag. So I'm not sure how that works out. And then you couldn't, if you had a stove, like a pocket rocket or a jet boil, that you had used, you weren't allowed to take it with you. It had to be new and never used, which was interesting, to say the least. And obviously your ammunition on the U.S. side of things, like Alaska Airlines didn't care when I flew from Phoenix to Edmonton if my ammunition was in the same container as the gun, but in Canada, they cared about that, and then when you went through customs, they cared about it. Nobody got upset at me, but I just took it out and put it in a different bag.
Gotcha. I enjoyed actually flying Alaska Air when Dar and I flew up to Anchorage. Actually, the staff and such seemed really, really good, and the plane seemed nice. I actually enjoyed Alaska for sure, Alaska Airlines.
Yeah, they were great. I mean, it was smooth sailing on the way there. On the way home, everything was good. The one thing that I would advise everyone of, because I didn't expect it this way, is we cleared U.S. Customs in Edmonton. And so that was kind of interesting because that's not what I expected. I expected we'd clear it in Seattle when we landed, but we cleared it in Edmonton. So make sure on the flight home, when you're flying from Edmonton to Seattle or wherever, that you give yourself 3.5 hours to clear customs. We only gave ourselves 2 hours, and everybody was great. Customs was absolutely not an issue. But, I mean, we made it with about 30 minutes to spare, and we didn't have any hiccups going through customs or anything like that. And we actually flew home with our sheep horns and our sheep capes in our bags. So I'm glad that I thought of that. But the one thing I'd recommend is that Mike and I both took oversized roller duffel bags with us, and they were only 75% full. So, and they had food in them. So on the way home, we consolidated and put all of our clothes in one bag and put both sheep horns in one roller duffel bag with both capes in the bottom of the roller duffel bag. And we stuffed a bunch of clothes in there and cardboard and stuff around the horns. And we flew our sheep horns and our capes home as checked baggage, which was super awesome because the bag weighed 81 pounds, and I think I paid $75 or $100 to fly home with it. But I mean, I had it right here in town, and there was never even an issue. When you clear customs, your bag goes through an X-ray machine, and the lady's like, "Oh, you guys did really well." And that was the end of that comment. I mean, they were more concerned if I had lithium batteries in my checked baggage than anything else.
Really?
Yep. So customs was great. TSA was great. Of course, I got pulled out to get checked. Mike got pulled out to get checked on the way there, and I got pulled out to get checked on the way back, but it was no issue. The paperwork they had was right there for you when you came to customs, and they deal with hunters all the time, so it was completely a non-issue. We flew home with 50 pounds of meat, and then both sheep horns, my life-size sheep cape, and Mike's shoulder mount sheep cape, and then our Caribou we transported to the cargo, Canadian North Cargo, and had them shipped to a shipping distributor in Edmonton because we kept our Caribou horns intact rather than splitting them so that they can be entered into the Pope and Young record book.
So that's something I didn't. How did you get the Caribou horns back?
So Canadian North has a cargo department because everything in Norman Wells that has to go anywhere has to be flown cargo, and so you just drive to the cargo shipping department of Canadian North, and the lady who was there, I mean, they deal with it all the time with moose racks and everything. You just go in there and she measures the width and the length and makes sure that you have the tines properly protected, and she takes the weight, and then they ship it from Norman Wells to a distributor in Edmonton called Talon Distribution, and then Talon Distribution will ship it to a warehouse in Phoenix, and then you can pick it up at the warehouse in Phoenix. It's kind of an additional cost, like the 2 full-size Caribou racks and 2 shoulder capes was $264 Canadian, which is roughly like $200 US, and then when Talon ships it to Phoenix, I'll have to pay another fee to do that, the cross customs, which I'm sure will cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $500. But if you were willing to split them, depending on the size of your caribou, you could potentially just put them in a long duffel bag and ship them home, just like we did with our sheep, and you would save yourself some money.
Sure. Good stuff. Okay, so you get to Arctic Red River Base Camp on the flight into base camp. How scenic was that?
Weather was incredible the day we arrived, and we flew, and it was just beautiful. I mean, it was amazing country, perfect day. When we land at base camp, we basically unload our stuff. We're shown a cabin where we can put excess gear, and Tavis hands you a food bag that your guided pack. Excuse me. It's your guided pack, and for me, I had some of my own food, so I went through it and took out what I didn't want, kept what I did want, and packed it all into my backpack. And then I was within an hour and a half of arriving at base camp, I was in the Super Cub on my way to meet my guide.
And is that typical where you fly in and immediately that day you're flying out? I mean, obviously weather permitting.
Yeah, as long as the weather's good, that's the way it was planned. We almost flew out the night before into base camp, but we had one extra person, so it was just, we didn't have the ability to take the bigger plane, and so they ended up just waiting to fly us out the next day, which was fine. It gave everybody a chance to shoot their bow and shoot the rifle. The Heritage Hotel in Norman Wells provided us with a truck, so we were able to drive to the rifle range and shoot our guns a couple of times. We were able to use that truck on the way home to drive to the Game and Fish Department to have our sheep checked, and to drive to the cargo shipping department and drive to the airport. So they're pretty user-friendly in that aspect of things. The owner can be a little bit rough around the edges, and when you start talking to people, it tends to be a pretty common theme, but you only deal with him sometimes. But other than that, they were very helpful. They gave us a truck, and we were able to shoot our bows basically right there in the parking lot and make sure everything was good to go. And it was nice to have that 5 or 6 hours in Norman Wells to get everything really tidied up as to what you wanted to bring for the actual trip.
I guess one question I would have is, like, if you did it again, you would know exactly what you want to bring. So would you even need that time, or do you still feel like there's a time when, like, if now that you've done it, would you be able to go and just have everything you need and be like, nope, I'm ready to go, I don't need any time?
Yeah, but that flight, like, our deal for that was that the flight, they were going to fly us out in a smaller plane, but because we had an extra person, it didn't work out that way. But yeah, I mean, you would have everything pretty well locked down. But I mean, remember, when you land in Norman Wells, all of your gear is in a duffel bag, and you're carrying on your backpack. So now you have to take all that gear from your duffel bag, put it in your pack, and pack it the way you want it, and then go.
Right. Okay.
So there is a little bit of time to do that.
That makes sense. Okay, so you arrive in base camp, you guys, and then you were immediately within an hour and a half. You're flying out in a Super Cub to go meet your guide. How long did your guide just stay out there? Was he coming off another hunt, or did he go in a couple days ahead of time to scout, or how did that work?
My guide was coming off another hunt, so he didn't really have any time in base camp, and that's pretty standard. They don't have a whole lot of time in base camp, and so he had come off another hunt. We flew out there and met him, and we were off and running. He had hunted those sheep on the first. He had hunted Curly the first hunt, and then another hunter and his guide had gone in there trying to kill him on the second hunt, while my guide was over doing a caribou hunt, and then my guide was back in there with me on the third hunt.
So one question I would have is, how much of a disadvantage do you feel like, next year I'm going on the first hunt? What are the positives and negatives that you see as going, first? And, just, I know you'll probably touch on it, but from an aspect of, there may be rams that they don't know about, and like in your case, they knew about this ram, which was an easy, yes, we're going to go hunt that ram type of scenario. But what do you see as positive and negatives of me going in 18 on the first hunt?
I think the positive on the first hunt, like anything, is you got first dibs on what's there. So, I mean, the sheep haven't been hunted, and you get to, figure out what ram you want to kill, and, you're the first go at it. So that's a positive, with the fact that it never gets dark on the first hunt. So, I mean, you basically are able to lighten yourself up by a pound, because there's no need to carry a headlamp or batteries for that matter. And generally speaking, the weather's milder, so I mean, you could get away with a 30-degree bag and just wear your super down and lighten yourself up that way. And you really don't need some of the warmer clothes for the most part, typically, on that first hunt. I would say the drawback is going to be that, you're going to be looking at country and looking for rams for the first time. And, some of the, no one's really been in there, and it's not going to have they fly it and see some sheep here and there occasionally, but it's not like they're going to have a great grasp like they did online of like, hey, we know this ram is here. He's going to be somewhere in this mountain range. We just have to turn him up, which you and I have been on hunts like that before. And I mean, it's real easy, and it gives you some motivation when you know a big ram is there and you just got to turn him up. It gives you that motivation to go a little harder and look over the next ridge. The sheep, from my understanding, on your hunt will be higher on the mountain because the bugs can be bad, and so the rams will be up higher where the wind is blowing, which can be a difficult thing to get them out and kill them on, but it also can be a better thing because sometimes they're more visible.
Right. And so how much if the rams are at the top, do you still feel like on my hunt that I will be going, hiking to the top to be looking for them, or will since they'll be out a little more exposed and out in the open and up high, will we be able to run those drainages, looking for sheep from the bottom?
Well, I mean, I think in general, a lot of it on the early hunt, and I haven't been on the early hunt, so I mean, but you will run the bottoms and look for the sheep and glass up, but you're also going to be going up and glassing down onto the sheep and things of that nature. And just, you'll be doing what we normally do on other hunts, just, trying to cover and glass and look as much country as you can. And it just means that you may have to go higher once you find that ram. I suspect you're going to glass that ram and find those rams from the bottom, and then you'll end up having to get up to them to kill them. I mean, I'm not an expert on the early hunts, but I know the weather helps push them down lower, and the later in the season, the lower they get on the mountain.
How spooky were they?
One of the things that Ryan told me right from the beginning is he said, look, if you get on a ram and he catches you, he's going to give you a minute or two to shoot him. So he said, if you see the ram catches you, do not just sit there and act like he's not going to see you. Just come to full draw and try and shoot him. And it was good advice. And when I did stalk the ram that I ended up killing with my bow, I had him at 70 yards. And there were 6 rams bedded. They didn't know I was there. And I had a full view of the number 2 ram. And I had just the head and neck of the ram I wanted to kill. And I was just trying to figure out how to get that extra yard to get high enough to shoot the sheep. And I was still hunkered down because I didn't know that I was there. And unbeknownst to me, the ram that I ended up killing ended up spotting something he didn't like or smelling something he didn't like. And he stood up and looked up at me for like a minute or two. And I never noticed that. All I heard after that 2 minutes was the rams running through the shale. And so I kind of lost an opportunity because had I known he was looking at me, I would have just kneeled up and shot. But they will give you an opportunity to shoot them. And then, if you're below them and they see you and you're not acting all kind of stealthy, a lot of times they'll let you get close enough to make it happen with a rifle, especially on that first hunt.
How were they compared to some of the desert or some of the Rockies that you and I have been around together, and real similar to that in that, if they see you and you act like you don't care that they're there, they don't really care. You start, like you said, acting stealthy through the brush and stuff, then they get a little more curious.
Yeah, I would say they kind of fall in between the 6A Rockies that I've spent a lot of time around and a desert sheep. As far as, I think desert sheep are a little more wary than the Dalls were, but I think the Dalls are more wary than the Rockies that I've been around in 6A.
Okay, so let's go back to the first day. So you fly into base, or you fly into your actual, drainage that you guys are going to hunt. You meet your guide, and he says, "What? We're going to go hunt curly?"
Yeah, he was actually looking at a legal ram at the time, but he said, "Hey, I got a ram that we want to kill," and I had kind of heard that rumor from everybody else. He showed me some video, and it was, obviously a ram that I would admit I was tickled to go chase, because I was looking for a flared out ram is what my hope was. If I had to pick a sheep, that was what I wanted. The broomed look was not something that I wanted. It doesn't mean I wouldn't have shot a broomed ram, but I was hoping to kill kind of a flaring, ram that had, some tips to him and things like that. That was kind of what I was hoping for. And so Ryan and I met. We loaded up our packs, and we basically had a nice hike up the bottom of the drainage, 5 miles. It wasn't bad. We probably crossed I think it was Fossil Creek is what we were hiking up, and we crossed the river, I don't know, probably 10 or 12, 15 times on that 5 miles. And the river's, generally speaking, anywhere from 6 to maybe 18 inches deep in certain parts. And so having boots and then having your gaiters hooked on your boots was obviously, you had to have gaiters. Ryan had told me that there were some other hunters that showed up that didn't have gaiters and stuff like that. And if you don't, you're going to have wet boots and wet feet pretty much throughout the hunt. You'll have some days where they're dry, but the gaiters sure help keeping your feet from just being damp as opposed to being like soaking wet.
Would you do anything with your creek crossings different, knowing what you
know? Yeah, I would make sure, even if you have synthetic or leather boots, to treat them before you go, like right before you go, with boot oil and any other waterproofing solution that you'd like. I would make sure to treat my gaiters with some sort of a waterproofing solution, whether it be camp dry or something like that. And then I would bring like a little bungee cord or a Velcro strap that I can put around my gaiters on my boot. So like right about mid-gaiter, where just below the top of my boot, I would put that little strap on there, and I'd just keep those straps either on my gaiters all the time, or I'd keep them on my trekking poles or something like that, just to kind of help that water from coming up from the bottom and getting toward those boots. But it's not a must-have. If you have the gaiters, and you really want the gaiters tight as you can get them, so that you kind of create a seal between the edge of the gaiter and the edge of your boot. But having that, like a Velcro strap or something like that, or a way to cinch them right there onto the boot would be helpful.
Okay, now, and did you wear rain pants on your walk so that you had an extra layer as well, and then put the gaiter over the rain pant? Would you have done that differently?
I didn't wear my rain pants on the initial day in, and I don't think it was a huge issue. I know we did wear rain pants on different days, and you could have easily worn just the rain pants and not even worn any other pants on the hike in, because the weather was nice enough, and it probably wouldn't have hurt anything. But the gaiters do a pretty good job. And then, I was wearing 2-use gaiters, and I was wearing the Rebel K Scarpa boots, not the ones that I was not wearing the ones with the built-in gaiter, but those synthetic boots are nice because, man, they sure dry really fast. If they get a little wet, setting them out or wearing them in the sunlight, they dry pretty quick. So it was nice to have, and they're so lightweight. They were definitely a nice pair of boots to have with that stiff sole.
Yeah, for sure. Darn, I really liked ours on our Alaskan goat hunt. Okay, so you guys are walking up the drainage, and you're crossing the creek back and forth, but are is the drainage climbing some serious elevation, or is it basically fairly flat,
Oh,
pretty easy 5 mile walk?
it was an easy 5 mile walk. The drainage is anywhere from 150 yards to 300 yards across, and it was not a bad walk at all. I mean, and we weren't trying to kill ourselves on it or anything like that.
And
We
it
actually camped right in the bottom.
like just a big alluvial river drainage where you're basically just walking on kind of sand and river rock, I would assume, from the pictures that you sent me, going up the drainage. And then I would assume you're crossing the creek. Maybe you get to places where there's a little bit of brush or something, which forces you to cross the creek and go up, the open part of the other side. Is that why you were crossing the creek back and forth?
That's exactly right. I mean, sometimes the river would run along the edges, and so it would kind of push you up into the alders and stuff. And we pretty much stayed out of that stuff as much as we could, just because it was easier to walk in the river bottom. And but yeah, it wasn't a bad hike at all. I mean, I had heard stories of the guy to walk you 20 miles on the first day. That was not my experience with Ryan at all, and not the experience that I had. I mean, other guys did do some longer hikes, but initially on that first day, it's kind of nice to get. I could have gone 7 to 10 miles if we needed to, but it's nice to kind of get that under your belt and kind of get your legs kind of going and kind of get used to what you're doing.
For sure. And so you guys go up, but a part of why maybe you only walked 5 miles is because he kind of already knew where this ram was going to be hanging and kind of had a plan. Whereas maybe like on my hunt, it's just going to be, we may be going a mile and glassing, and then walking 5 miles and glassing, and then, end up 10 miles up the drainage, right?
Yeah, I mean, we knew where we were going. I mean, I think had it been like a first season hunt, we probably would have been hunting that first ram that he had spotted that was legal, being that he was a bow ram. And everyone had told me that if you're trying to kill a sheep with a bow, every legal ram, you're going to stop.
Right.
And, but yeah, I mean, that whole 5 mile hike, I probably saw, 25 or 30 different sheep on the hike, because there were sheep on both sides of the drainage, and there's no mistaking a Dall sheep on a mountainside. I mean, they stick out quite a bit.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. I mean, were you able to see a bunch of them just with your naked eye? I mean, that's one thing, we didn't even take tripods on our mountain goat hunt. We knew our guide would have one. I think I'm going to obviously take one on the sheep hunt, but I mean, we basically could see every goat with our naked eye. Was that kind of how it was with the sheep?
Yeah, I mean, they were real easy to spot. You could easily, if you didn't see them with your naked eye, you could easily spot them, with handheld binoculars. I took 1042 ELs. I would have taken 1250 ELs, but I wanted to have an additional rangefinder in case something went bad with my Leopold rangefinder that I had. I didn't have any issues. Initially, I did take my tripod no matter what, even for my binoculars, and initially I did not take my spotting scope, but after killing my caribou, when they flew in to get my meat and my horns, I had them bring my spotting scope back, and I carried it the rest of the trip, and I was happy to have it. And I will say that, if your optics are better than your guide will be more than willing to carry that stuff with you typically. My guide had the exact same binoculars I did, and he had the exact same spotting scope that I did, so it didn't matter.
That's good stuff. So you guys are walking up, you're going to set camp, and now you're primarily archery hunting. At this point, I believe you don't even have the rifle with you, and you have a mountain caribou and Dall sheep. And was your initial plan just to shoot a caribou if you saw one in an opportune place and focus on sheep hunting, or talk a little bit about your strategy of what you guys were trying to do?
Well, Ryan agreed because I had a 30 caliber rifle that he would carry my gun. And so rather than carry his gun, he carried my gun. So I had the rifle there the whole time. But my strategy was all I cared about was killing a sheep. If I killed a caribou, it was going to be an opportunity thing, or I would have already killed my sheep, and so I was going to go hunt caribou. So I had the tag. I didn't really intend. I mean, I didn't, one way or the other, my goal was to kill sheep. I didn't have to kill a caribou. But as it turned out, we got to camp. It was probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 o'clock. We glassed around and hung out and talked and kind of talked about expectations and, you know, just kind of, I guess, kind of sized each other up, figured out where we were at, and we got along great, and we were both, you know, very similar, like-minded individuals. And Ryan said, you know, hey, we'll get up at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we'll start our hunt from there. And I was like, okay. So we went to bed. It didn't get dark till like 11:30, but it was getting light at like 4:30 in the morning. And so I slept and then woke up at like, I don't know, 6:30. Was kind of excited. So I got out of the tent and was glassing around, looking at rams, looking at sheep, and just kind of having a good time. And Ryan was kind of getting ready in his tent and stirring a little bit, and I heard something behind me, and basically I heard something walking in the river rocks, and I had had a conversation with Ryan the day before. I was like, hey, you know, like, how bear aware do I need to be? And he's like, you need to be aware all the time. And I was like, okay. So I heard something walking behind me, and I turn around, and there's a caribou bull standing there at 30 yards. And I was like, okay. So I yelled at Ryan and said, yeah, he was standing there looking at me. And so I yelled at Ryan, and he's like, you know, he's, what? And I was like, there's a pretty good caribou bull out here. I need you to tell me if he's big enough to shoot. And as he's kind of getting organized, I am creeping over to my tent to get my bow and get my release on. And about the time I get my bow and my release on, the caribou is kind of circling us, kind of making a wide circle around us to go past us. And I hit the caribou, and he was like 58 yards away. And Ryan, I hear him unzip the fly of his tent. And I turn around, and he's looking out the tent with his binoculars, and he was like, I shoot that bull. And so I came to full draw, and the bull was walking at 60 yards, and I shot him quartering away with my bow. And he ran out there about 250 yards and just tipped over. And that was how the first day started.
Oh, that's amazing.
And it turned out to be the only caribou I saw.
That is amazing. And the pictures, he had rubbed his velvet. How long do you think he had been out of his velvet?
Maybe a day.
Okay. And then they pretty dang big bodies on them. Would you say how do they compare to an elk?
Smaller than an elk, but bigger than a mule deer. And, you know, once you kill something, you got to get it out. So he was dead at 8:30, and we went over and worked on him together, and we pulled off a quarter, and I deboned the quarters while Ryan taped out the head, and then Ryan had to turn the lips and the ears, the nose. And then we started our hike back to the airstrip and got to the airstrip. I think it was about 8 o'clock, and they flew in and picked up my caribou and picked up the meat, and we turned around and hiked back the 5 miles and got back to camp and went to bed. That was pretty much our first day, but I felt kind of blessed because we'd only lost a day and killed a great caribou.
Right, so that left you with 14 days to hunt sheep. So when you guys went back to the airstrip, Ryan, you guys must have already called in and said, hey, come, you know, make a pickup, right? You didn't wait till you got to the strip and then call.
No, once Ryan had the cape taken care of for the lips and ears and everything and turned, he called and said, hey, we'll be at the airstrip at 8 or whatever, and they showed up. Literally, like, we unloaded our packs and the airplane landed, and we gave them the stuff, and off they went.
Nice.
And that's when they brought me my spotting scope back, which was nice to have.
Cool. So you were able to say, now you know you're going to be just sheep hunting, so bring me my spotting scope.
Right.
Okay, so now you go back and you go to sleep, and so now you have, basically, you didn't hardly waste any time. You just burned 1 day, you've got a great caribou down, and you've got 14 days to hunt sheep. Had any sign of Curly at that point?
No, we were camped right below where the ram had been, on the second guys that had been in there, and there were 2 rams there. You know, they were like 1,000 yards from us, and those rams didn't have Curly with him. And so the next morning we went up on top, and basically we hiked up this big long ridge and got up on the top of the main ridge line of the mountain range. And right as we topped out, the weather rolled in and we were fogged in, and sometimes we couldn't see 25 yards. And we kind of weathered it out. We were getting kind of rained on all day. And we hung out there for, 5 or 6 hours. And finally it was like, I don't think this is going to lift. And we ultimately made the decision to just hike back down. And we didn't do much walking around on top because we couldn't see and we weren't willing to start bumping things around. And so we just hiked back off the top and went back to camp. And the rain up there was not like a torrential downpour like we get in Arizona. It's more of just a constant rain. You know, you're not getting hammered with just big drenchers, but you're just constantly getting rained on.
Right. Kind of a annoying rain because it never stops.
Right. And so once we got hiked back down to camp, the next day was kind of a bust because the weather socked us in. I mean, the clouds were all over and it was raining all day. And on those hunts where you have that much time, you expect to lose some days to rain, and you really don't want to. The guides really are hesitant to go out on just a nasty weather day because you just don't need to. And when you're out in those nasty weather days, you're getting soaked, you're getting wet, and there's no really way to dry things out. So we just spent that whole third day in the tent. I read a book. I was thankful to have a book. I ended up reading 2 books while I was there, and it was definitely a must-have item. And we just hung out. And then day 4, the weather was better. It wasn't raining, but the clouds were a little bit lower. But we said, we're going. So we made the 2-hour hike to the top ridge line. Right as we got to the top, the weather kind of rolled in again, and we're like, man, is this going to do it to us again? And we kind of waited it out for about an hour, and it cleared out, and we were glassing some really neat country, some neat fingers, and we're getting ready to move, and I walked about 100 yards to kind of glass off a different direction, and I spotted 2 rams, and Ryan came over, and he instantly put the spotting scope on the ram, and he's like, that's Curly, that's the ram. And so they were below us. We were on the main spine of the ridge of the mountain range, and they were on a finger that came off the opposite side of our camp. And so we were able to just walk down the ridge line, and it only took us about 30 minutes, and we had already closed the distance to 400 yards of Curly and another 9-year-old ram that he was with that had a big old loop of a curl, but he just, he hadn't finished out quite yet, but he was going to be a pretty solid ram. And when we got to 400 yards, they were on a ridge where the backside of the ridge was grass and the one side of the ridge was shale, and so we were able to walk down the backside of the ridge and close the distance to 160 yards and got to watch them for a long time, but they moved into the shale further, and there was nothing I could do with them where they were at, so we just sat there and got a whole bunch of digiscoping video and watched him at 160 yards for like 4 hours, and then finally, it was getting later, and we're like, well, we're not going to get a chance to do anything with him where he's at right now. So we just backed out and went back to camp, and that was pretty much day 4. So obviously there's a lot of anticipation for day 5, and where they were at provided me with some chance to definitely get on them with my bow. And so the next day we hiked up the ridge, did the usual, found the sheep on the same finger. Only now
they have no idea you're there. They hadn't seen you guys or nothing. Okay.
They had no idea we were there. There were 6 rams though on day 5, as opposed to the day before. There was only Curly and 1 other ram, and they bedded on the same ridge, but they bedded in the grass. And so now I was able to slip to 70 yards easily of the sheep. and we kind of talked about it earlier. I was in position trying to figure out how to get that extra elevation to shoot, and Curly just had a sixth sense because he had been pursued, and he had, he was wise to the game a little bit because he was with a really big broom ram earlier in the season, and the first hunters to chase him actually killed that broom ram, and he was standing right there when they killed that broom ram, but he was just over the roll of the hill, so they were going to shoot either one, and they shot the broom ram. And so Curly had been wise to the game, and when he bumped, I don't know if he got a little bit of my wind or just caught a little movement or something. He definitely didn't know what was up, and they only ran like 250 yards into these shale fingers, and just they all bedded right back down. Like the other rams had no idea what the heck was going on. And so Ryan had stayed up on top and videotaped all of that, and I hiked back up on top with him, and we sat on the ram for a couple of hours, and we're debating on what to do. And Ryan was great in the aspect of he never said like,
you need to get the big boomstick and smash that thing. He didn't say like I probably would have been saying.
Yeah, no, he never gave me any pressure either way. He didn't care. I mean, I know he wanted Curly to get killed, but he never pushed me to do one thing or the other. And I just started thinking about the hunt and stuff. And I guess kind of what I learned about myself is that I don't make a ton of money, and this is kind of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I don't know that I'll ever get to do it again. And so what I learned kind of is that if I'm not willing to go home without a sheep, which I wasn't, then there's really no point in taking a bow unless you're willing to go home without a ram, and I was not willing to do that. And so I started thinking about it, and I'm like, this is an exceptional sheep. I've seen several rams now. I knew kind of what I was looking at, and you could tell with the excitement of Ryan and everybody else about the ram that it was a really great ram. And I actually called Nicole, my wife, and kind of talked to her on the phone when we were up there, because we were on the top of the ridge, so we could do anything we wanted and be loud because the wind was blowing so hard up high. But I talked to her on the phone and kind of told her my plan. I like to get her advice because, she knows how I think and how I operate. And she was like, look, I think you should kill him with a gun. If you're going to be happy, and I mean, he's as good as ram as you say. I mean, you definitely want to kill a ram, so I think you should do it. And so that was kind of the decision there. And once the decision was made, it was basically we snuck out to the edge, and I set up the 300 short mag. I used the lid of my pack that had a bunch of jackets in it as a rest, and I set up on him, and I dry fired a couple times just to make sure I was comfortable. And then I made sure Ryan was rolling video, and he was laying in his bed all by himself, and I made a really good shot, and he just rolled out of his bed, rolled about 500 yards down the shale slide, and that was it, man. That was kind of the Dall sheep, the end of Curly. It finally put him down, and Ryan was ecstatic to finally be able to put his hands on the ram. And I was super pumped. I knew it was a really good sheep. I just didn't know how good he was until we kind of got down to him and walked up on him. And when you walk up on a 40-inch ram, you're it was pretty impressive to say the least. I mean, I couldn't have scripted a better ram for my hunt. I couldn't have killed a ram that I would have wanted to take home more than this ram. I mean, he just had everything I was hoping to get in a sheep.
Yeah, he's a dream ram for sure. I mean, he's just unbelievable. How did he compare to you said there was 6 others. Was there any others that were even remotely close to him as far as size or age or what have you?
Yeah, there were 8 rams in camp by the time I left, and there was one other ram that was of the same size, and he was just a touch longer, and he had bigger bases than Curly did, but he didn't carry his mass out to his second and third quarters like Curly did. So he got me a little bit on the bases. The length was pretty comparable. I mean, within a half inch. But Curly kind of surpassed him out on the second and third quarter mass measurements. But this other ram was super impressive looking because Curly has what I would call a soccer ball size curl, and this ram had a basketball-sized curl, so it was really cool to look at.
Mm-hmm.
But there were 2 rams in camp. Go ahead.
Go ahead. There was 2 rams in camp, but go back to the question of when you decided to shoot Curly. I think he was with 6 other rams. How did he compare to those rams?
The 9-year-old ram, which was the number 2 ram with Curly, he's going to be a good ram next year. But Curly, there was no question what ram was better when you got to look at him. And Curly was definitely the bigger of the 2 rams. That 9-year-old ram is going to be something impressive come next year, depending on what he throws and what he pushes out to. But he's going to be a ram that really has some potential to be a big one.
Cool. And then you were talking about as far as the rams that were in camp, Curly stacked up really nice. There was one other ram that had a similar look, but Curly carried more mass throughout the horn, and we've talked about that a lot on this podcast about when we talk about sheep and field judging. I have no experience with thin horns, but we're talking big horns. Carrying that mass throughout the horn is hugely important. And if you have rams that have the same size bases, the very next thing you look for is he carrying that mass throughout the whole horn? And your ram's just an unbelievable ram, just a dream ram, to be honest with you. I don't think you could even drawn one up even better than the one you shot.
Yeah, no, I was, really happy to have killed him. I didn't know, I've got more experience with Rockies than I do probably anything else, and I kind of know how we operate as far as you generally get an idea of what kind of mass you're looking at on the sheep, and then you figure out kind of what lengths you're looking at. And, I didn't know what to expect on thin horn rams, and I think, the general rule with those sheep up there is that you got to find a ram. If you're going to get into that 160 mark, you got to find a ram that's got 40-inch horns, and he's got to have 40 inches of mass per side. And I think the 40-inch horn thing is, if you find a ram that's got 40-inch horns, he's probably going to push his way into that mark, but it doesn't always happen that way. They killed a 43-inch ram before I got there, but he didn't have the mass. But, there's no way, in my opinion, that you would have passed that 43-inch ram. No way, because the look was so impressive. And, of all the 8 rams that we killed, there were 2 in the 160s, 4 in the 150s, and I would say mid to upper 150s, and then there were 2 rams in the upper 140s. And, one of the rams in the upper 140s was killed by a bow hunter, and that was the only opportunity that particular hunter had to kill a sheep. And, to get it done with your bow and, be 100% on stocks, one and done, that's pretty impressive.
That is impressive.
And then the other ram that was in the upper 140s was super cool looking because he had a curl and a half. It's just the curl was like a softball-sized curl. But, when you look at him on the hoof, you're like, wow, that thing is freaking cool looking. And, he would have been a difficult ram to pass. And up there, the whole deal is about they're trying to shoot 10-year-old rams. And that's the goal and the focus is to try and kill a ram that's 10 years old. And so you're not really going to pass. Your guide is going to encourage you to shoot anything that is 10 or older. That's the goal,
Right.
Okay. Well, I'm obviously a big supporter of the Kuiu stuff and the Kuiu gear. So on my sheep hunt, as far as pants were concerned, I'll just go through it. I took 1 pair of Alpine pants for my sheep hunt. And then I had the Ultra Merino 145 zip-off, long underwear. And I'll tell you what, those zip-off long underwear are an amazing product. I've never had any experience with them, but being able to zip them off without having to take your boots off and stuff, that is an incredible piece of equipment.
Yeah.
I had super down pants, but I never used them. I never needed them for anything. My shirt, I use the Ultra Merino 145 long sleeve shirt. the kind of the crew neck shirt. I don't like the zip collars or anything like that. And I only brought one, but I would recommend bringing two. For a jacket, I took my super down jacket and I took my guide jacket, and it was a good combination. The guide jacket's kind of a nice outer shell, kind of protects you from the wind, and obviously I'd never go anywhere without my super down jacket. I had a Peloton 240, full zip, no hood, kind of, I call it my sweater, kind of my layering system. And then my rain gear was the Chugach NX. I had one set pants and a jacket. For gloves, I had a thin liner pair, and then I had a pair of guide gloves. My socks, I took 3 pairs, and I was super thankful for that. I had 2 pair of Swiftwick, which are liner Swiftwick 7 socks. I think you guys took those to Alaska, but those things are amazing.
Yeah, the Aspire 7.
Yeah. And then I took the 3 pairs of KUIU regular socks, and 1 pair of the KUIU socks never left my tent, and then I would just rotate socks every day so that I had a dry pair to start the day out with, because even if you're putting a dry pair of socks into wet boots, it still feels better than putting wet socks into wet boots. And I took a Peloton 240B, the Ultramarino 145 net gator. I had my Scarpa Rebel K boots, and then my Gators, KUIU Gators. I opted to take a pair of Morel Bear Access 4 trail shoes, and I would much rather have a pair of trail shoes than a pair of Crocs, just because I have size 13 feet, so having the Crocs are cumbersome, and the Morel trail shoes are much smaller, and they weigh less than the Crocs, which is surprising, I know, but they actually weighed less than the Crocs in my size.
And are those, when you say trail shoes, are those the ones that, like look like a human foot, like they're just like those sock things, or are they the actual No,
it's a shoe. It's not.
It's a shoe.
No, it's an actual shoe.
Okay.
It's not like the ones that you put that are like the toe shoes and stuff. But and I really like that. My guide had a pair of fly fishing shoes that were fairly common name, real lightweight shoe that he wore when we were walking around camp. But yes, that's exactly what they were.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, but I liked having those instead of
Crocs,
and they just took up a lot less space and they weighed less. And then something that took me a long time to figure out what I wanted to take was what kind of boxers I wanted to take. And I ended up going with EXO Official 9-inch inseam boxers that I found at REI, and I actually ordered them online, and they were absolutely amazing. They're lightweight. They do not stink. I'm a big fan of Under Armour boxers, but you can't wear Under Armour boxers for 7 days because you won't be able to freaking stand yourself. And those EXO Official boxers were incredible. I tried, the First Light red setter boxers or something like that, and I just didn't like the way they fit because I want like a compression pant boxer, and I want the longer inseam so you don't have to worry about any like chafing or anything on the inside of your legs. And so I was super, super happy with those. And that's my overall clothing that I took. Couple things that I'll touch on right now that I would recommend that I might have done differently is I might have just taken a Yukon rain jacket and gotten rid of my guide jacket and my Chugach rain jacket and potentially my Peloton 240. Because that Yukon rain jacket is like 4 ounces more than the guide jacket. And if I can get rid of the guide jacket and the Chugach rain jacket, then I'm saving weight.
Yeah.
And that Yukon jacket's pretty stout when it comes to dealing with the rain and things like that. So that might have been something that I would look into doing. I rarely wore that Peloton 240. So, I mean, if I could cut out 3 articles of clothing in exchange for 1, you definitely got to have some sort of a shell to protect from the wind and stuff, because the wind definitely gets ripping, and, might be something that I would look into doing differently. But that would that's just, it's kind of a personal preference, and having some knowledge of what I've done before, that would be something I would look at.
Yeah, I mean, coming from Arizona, it was 110, 15 degrees all summer. It's kind of hard to, you're trying to grasp what kind of temperature. I'm sure you were making sure you wanted to be warm, but I think you probably ended up realizing that on that sheep hunt portion of your hunt, you were moving quite a bit, and you can leave quite a bit of stuff at home, and you do just fine without it.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I think it would have been a good trade-off, and I would have liked to have had that kind of the sturdier rain jacket than the Chugach one that I have. The Chugach worked fine, but I mean, if you're sitting there for 4 hours getting beat down in the rain, over time, everything's going to lose some of its ability to repel water, and you're going to end up wet to some extent. The other thing that I would have brought is that I would have brought a heavier set of waterproof gloves, like the Yukon Pro gloves potentially. The Guy gloves were good and they did pretty well, but once they got wet, it kind of sucks to have wet hands. And so I would have maybe just brought the Yukon Pro gloves and maybe a really lightweight pair to maneuver around in, just to keep my hands, warm. But it ultimately wasn't a huge issue. It's just something I would look at.
Okay, what about the rest of your gear?
So I'll go into my gear. A couple of things that I think are really important to note is that one thing that no one really tells you, and it didn't say in the gear list, is that you're going to be given 5 pounds of salt to carry. So you got to factor that in to your pack weight. So like when I got there, I got basically a Nalgene bottle full of salt, and it's your responsibility to carry that in. Now, you don't necessarily have to carry it every day with you, but you've got to carry it into camp so that in the event you kill something and it takes 3 or 4 days to get in there, you have a way to salt your hide. Now, we never used the salt because we were able to get a plane in within 24 hours of killing an animal. But definitely something to factor in, because 5 pounds added to your pack weight is quite a bit. The gear things that for me that were absolutely couldn't go without is like Leukotape was incredible. There's no need for you to carry moleskin, anything of that nature, if you have Leukotape, in my opinion.
Did you pre-tape?
Was not something.
Did you pre-tape, or did you just tape as you go?
I didn't pre-tape anything. I only taped my left heel on the 3rd day because I had a little bit of a warm spot, and that was the only thing I taped. But my guide, from being in there for like 50 days and losing weight and stuff, his hip belt was starting to rub and raw on his hips, and so we taped up his hip on the one side, and it helped him, solve that problem. And I mean, I don't know why people ever even buy moleskin anymore, because I'll never carry moleskin anymore as long as I got Leukotape. I would carry an entire roll of Leukotape up there, and the minute you feel a hot spot, or if you're prone to blisters, just pre-tape your heels and pre-tape wherever and move on. I mean, that stuff lasted easily 7-8 days, no problem, and it solved any problem you could have. I didn't have major issues, but I mean, to me, if there's one piece of gear that's super critical, having that Leukotape was worth its weight in gold.
Yeah, I second that for sure. I pre-taped. Justin Schaefer recommended pre-taping, and it's just great stuff. I mean, it's fantastic stuff. What else you got, Rims?
Yeah. So I took an Icon Pro 7200 with a Rainfly. Rainfly was great. Fit over my bow, attached to the pack, and everything of that nature. I took my own tent. I took a Kuiu Mountain Tarp 2-person tent with aluminum poles. I would recommend everyone take their own tent if that's what they're comfortable with, because Tavis was providing Kuiu Mountain Star 2-person tents, but you don't know what kind of care the hunter right before you took of that, and neither does Tavis. And so if you got a tent that leaked or got a tent that had a hole or something, it would just suck. So Tavis provides great gear, but Tavis can't monitor what every other hunter does to his gear and things like that. So I took the QU Mountain Star 2-person tent, and do not take it in. I was told aluminum poles were the only way to go, because if you get a nick in the carbon fiber poles, then they just shatter, is what I was told. So I never had that experience, but I was happy with the tent. I took a Thermarest sleeping pad. I took a Montbell 0-degree sleeping bag that was longer in length, and so was my sleeping pad, because I'm 6'3", and it was worth a little bit extra weight to have that extra length for sure. I took my Swarovski 1040 EO Rangers, like I mentioned. I took the SPS 65 spotting scope. It was HD with that 25 to 50 wide angle eyepiece. I used a marsupial gear size small vinyl harness. Jim Graham's a pretty good guy. It's a local company, and I really like the product. It works well for me up there. My go-to rangefinder was a Leopold RX 1200i, which is just an exceptional rangefinder for angle compensation. That's what a lot of the real competitive archers use and things of that nature. I took a carbon fiber slick tripod. It's a 613 CF. It's pretty lightweight. I utilized the Outdoorsman's fan head and the Outdoorsman's tripod adapter. I took 2 Easton trekking poles that were carbon fiber, and I would highly recommend that you take trekking poles because it was extremely helpful with heavy loads and kind of balancing yourself out. I think we've talked about that before, Jay, but I wouldn't go anywhere without trekking poles, and I'm hoping that you'll bring them back to me next year, because I left them next to the moose camp, and I'm hoping that Tavis will pick them up and give them to you to bring back to me next year.
Maybe I just won't bring them next year, and I'll make sure to bring yours back. For sure take 2, or would you only take 1 if you had to do it again?
I'd take 2.
Yeah, me too.
I would absolutely take 2. I took a Goal Zero Nomad 7 solar charger, and there's some reviews online about Goal Zero stuff that are not always favorable. My experience was nothing but exceptional. That solar charger worked awesome, and I paired it with a Venture 30 power pack, and then I also had a Goal Zero Flip 20 power pack, and those things were incredible. They worked great. I was super happy with them. I took 2 headlamps. Probably really get away with 1. I took a Petzl Actic and a Petzl React. The Actic operates off lithium batteries, and the React operates off a rechargeable. I'm favorable toward taking a headlamp that uses batteries. If you can find one, preferably that has a rechargeable battery and will take batteries, that would be my favor. But I don't want to have to recharge a headlamp if something happens. I'd like to just be able to throw batteries in it, and I never had to change the batteries in my headlamp the whole time I was there. And the night I killed my sheep, I probably ran it for, 8 or 9 hours. I took a Canon G9X camera with the Times Up adapter setup, and it was incredible. I use a satellite, Iridium Go satellite device. Basically converts your iPhone into a sat phone, allows you to text with it. A little bit heavy, maybe slightly heavier than a sat phone, but I'm not sure that it is. And then I also brought my iPhone 7 in a life-proof case with the Outdoorsman's phone scope adapter. I had downloaded all the maps for where I was going to be on my iPhone 7, and I used that as a GPS. And having that life-proof case on it means that you didn't have to worry about it getting wet or anything of that nature.
How was the topo maps? How useful was that?
I hardly used them, but they were super accurate, and they did everything I needed them to do.
Okay.
And then I took 6 AAA lithium batteries solely for my headlamp, and then I had 3 zip dry bags, 1 large, 2 small, and then 3 roll top dry bags from Kuyu. They're Kuyu, one's 2 medium, one small. I opted for a 2-liter platypus bladder, which was more than enough because you pair that with a 1-liter Nalgene, you got your 3 liters, and that was fine.
Did you purify your water or just drink it right out of the streams?
No, I didn't purify anything. I drank lake water for 7 days when I was moose hunting, and I was fine. It didn't taste as good as the stream water, but it was fine.
Was there any fish? Was there any fish in the streams or in the lake?
Yeah, there was Arctic char in the streams, and then there was Arctic char and grayling in the lakes.
Like right by your sheep camp, there were Arctic char. Like you could catch them?
Yeah.
No way.
Yep, and then when I went to moose camp on the lake, we should have taken a fishing pole because we would have caught a bunch of fish.
Really?
I took a titanium cup, a GSI Outdoors titanium cup that you can put right on your pocket rocket, and it holds all your stuff inside of it. I took a Thermarest butt pad. If I was going to do things differently, I would have my Thermarest butt pad was like 12 inches by 12 inches, and I would take a Thermarest butt pad that was like 24 inches by 24 inches because you want it with you all the time, because if you're raining and you have to sit down on the tundra, the grass, you don't want to freaking sit, and get your butt all wet. And then you also use it as kind of a doormat in and out of your tent. And so I would take one that's bigger than normal. And in the event that you get stuck out all night, you can at least give you some insulation from the ground and sit on that. Couple of things that I wish I had. Probably the number one thing that I wish I may have had would have been a lightweight shelter tarp. So several companies make those, but when you're on top of the ridge or on top of the mountain and it's raining, there's not a tree in sight. So you're just getting pounded by rain. And if you can use, even if it's a 12-foot by 12-foot tarp that weighs, they weigh right at a pound or a little less, and you prop them up with your trekking poles, just that little bit of comfort to get out of the rain makes a huge difference in how long and how comfortable you are staying up on the mountain. So that's something that if there was one thing I wish I could bring, that's what I would have brought for sure, is to have that. It's probably, and my wife, of course, she just walked in, so she wishes she could have gone too.
Did you hear about me whipping out an umbrella up there in Alaska?
I didn't, but I bet you were darn glad to have it.
I got ridiculed by Joe, our guide, and Dar, of course, but after about 30 minutes of rain, they both were trying to get under it with me.
Yeah, no, I mean, having that shelter tarp, I would even devote a pound and a half to that thing to get one that's like 12 feet by 12 feet. I'm sorry, 12 feet by 12 feet or something like that, because it would be incredible to do that, and it'd be a lot easier to stay dry. It's all about comfort. The more comfortable you are, the longer you can stay up on the mountain,
Yeah. Any other things you had up there?
My guide had a Helinox chair, which is a little, like, pound and a half chair that has, like, a little 30-degree, recline to it. And I tell you, it was nice to have, especially for him when he's caping out my caribou and stuff like that back at camp. It was a pretty nice little feature to have. It's not a necessity by any means, but he carries it everywhere he goes. And he's like, man, it just saves you. When you're getting ready in the morning, you can sit in it, put your shoes on, and things like that. And I would think for maybe guys that are a little bit older or a little less mobile, it would be just something that's really worth having.
Talk about your food.
So Tavis provides pretty much any Mountain House meal you want, all the candy bars you can imagine. He provides a bunch of the Costco, like peanut packages and cashew packages and almond packages, a bunch of top ramen, all the coffee that you want, and a bunch of additives for like top ramen, where you can add like freeze-dried steak and stuff like that to it. And I mean, he really has a really good food selection there. So I mean, I would say that you don't need to necessarily bring all of your food unless there's something specific you want. I mean, basically all the Mountain House flavors that you could ever want. He had, just a lot of the food that you would want. So what I ended up doing and eating was breakfast was 2 oatmeal packets, and I would mix in a packet of Justin's peanut butter. Bring in those little individual packets of peanut butter if it's something you'd like, or almond butter or whatever. I would definitely bring those because that was not something that would be the norm to be provided. I had a breakfast skillet every once in a while for lunch. For breakfast, I brought some of those on my own.
I like those.
I
like those skillets.
Yeah, Tavis had the breakfast, like eggs and stuff, but the skillets are nice because they have kind of a good mixture of stuff.
Yeah.
And then that would pretty much consist that and coffee. I like Trader Joe's instant coffee. It's freeze-dried coffee, and it already has cream and sugar mixed in it. To me, it's a million times better than the Starbucks stuff, just taste-wise. And 2 packets is enough for a great cup of coffee. But Tavis provides, cappuccino mix and all sorts of stuff. It's really good, too. Lunch pretty much consisted of Cliff Bars, candy bars. I had made Costco trail mix, and I mixed in a whole bag of peanut M&Ms with 2 servings of Costco trail mix for every day. And Top Ramen. Top Ramen, surprisingly, has like 500 calories in it. Actually contains 9 grams of protein, and is actually pretty good when it's a cold day outside. The broth is just tasty, and then provides some good food for you, and it's lightweight and easy to pack around. Dinner was a Mountain House, and it followed with a candy bar, and then I took Wilderness Athlete Hydrate and Recover, at least 1 packet a day, and then I took Propel packets. So I like the Propel packets, and I took 2 of those every day with me, and I would fill my Nalgene bottle with Propel, and then my regular bladder would have just straight water in it.
Right on.
If I was going to do things a little differently, I would have brought some cheese. I'd have probably bought some sort of a chip or a Cheez-It or something along that nature. And then one of the other guys had different freeze-dried meals that he had brought up there, which was a company called Heather's Choice, which I believe is based out of Alaska. And they're actually smaller, like half the size as far as packaging is concerned. And they're really loaded with a lot of good stuff. So it might be nice to have a couple of those just to kind of mix in. There's some really, really unique flavors that she has. And they're a little more expensive, but they're pretty darn good. And it's kind of nice to have a different change. I mean, my two go-to Mountain House meals was freaking chicken and rice because it was like the most calories you could get in a Mountain House. And then biscuits and gravy were my 2 go-to Mountain House meals.
I had that Heather of Heather's Choice, had her on a podcast last summer, and she does. She's really coming out with some really good products, and I know she's a lot of people are really liking it. So I definitely encourage people to check it out. She seemed like a really cool cat, and okay, so we've covered the food, we've covered the gear, unbelievable hunt. So then now you've got your Dall sheep down, you've got a mountain caribou down, and then it was kind of like you kind of decided that you might want to go check out some moose. Tell me about that briefly.
Well, I was back in camp on the evening of day 6, and I had a 15-day hunt, and I was there with, another guy, and so, I wasn't going anywhere, and Mike was still hunting, and I was going to go help Mike, but Mike was a day's hike from from an airstrip, and, I just didn't want to mess up whatever him and his guide had going. Sometimes a third person can kind of help or kind of hurt the situation, and I didn't want to impact whatever he had going with his guide, and so I had talked to Tavis and said, hey, initially I asked him if I could get another caribou tag, and he's like, well, you can only kill 1 caribou, and I was like, well, what about a moose tag? And he's like, well, moose doesn't open until September 1st, and I was like, yeah, that'll still give me 6 days to hunt moose, and so we worked it out to where I could go hunt moose, and spent 6 days looking at moose and seeing a lot of moose, and, saw one moose that I probably would have been willing to put an arrow in, but ultimately the moose was like 3 miles from where we could get the plane to, and I wasn't packing 800 pounds of animal 3 miles across the tundra. It just was not going to happen.
Were they calling at all?
So we just no. I did hear a female moose calling to her calf, but they were just their rut pretty much coincides with our elk rut.
Gotcha.
So I would say they were just in the midst of rubbing off the velvet, and they're hot and heavy by about the 15th of September, and so they were just starting to get frisky with it. And I didn't have to shoot a moose, but it was nice to go look at moose and look at some different things and kind of have that opportunity. And Tavis was cool about it, and we were only 8 miles from the main camp, and we could actually glass the main camp every day. And we saw 7 to 8 moose a day. Just, we were waiting for one to get himself in a position close to the lake so that we could actually make it happen. And it just never worked out, which was okay. I mean, I already had a super successful hunt. I wasn't disappointed at all not to shoot a moose.
And you saw Travis and Brad Wiest in the airport were coming back, because we had them on the podcast, and they were doing a 21-day hunt where they were doing Dall sheep, mountain caribou, and a moose hunt. Where'd you see those guys?
Yeah, I saw them at base camp, because the flight that they came in on is the flight that I took out. And so we got to chat with them for about 5 minutes. They were super jacked and super excited, and they're the last hunt of the year at Arctic Red, and, the weather was changing quite a bit. I think that, their moose hunt's going to be exceptional, but I think their main focus was obviously trying to kill sheep. And so, I mean, I think that they're going to get opportunities to kill sheep, and it'll ultimately be up to them if they kill a sheep, because I don't see it not getting a chance. It's just a matter of whether they can capitalize on those chances they get and go from there, and how much time they're going to devote to chasing, each animal. I don't know that they'll get a chance to kill all 3 animals that they're hunting, but they're definitely going to see them all, and they're just going to have to make that decision. I told them to hold out for a big caribou, because there's definitely a chance to kill a giant caribou up there. I mean, one of them that came into camp was like 450, which was an absolute slob of a caribou. And so, I mean, they definitely have some chances to do some really cool things with that. But they were excited, and they were ready to go, and the weather had been pretty good the last couple of days before they got there, so I think they were going to have some decent weather days.
Good. And Jonesy, he got a sheep and a caribou both, right?
Yeah, Mike stuck it out with his bow for 9 days and ended up shooting a ram that he'd been trying to kill with his bow on the 9th day, and made a good shot. Real solid upper 150s ram that he was able to put on the ground, and then he flew straight from there to caribou camp and spent 5 days chasing caribou, and ended up killing a caribou with his bow on the 14th. The evening of the 14th day. So he spent one night in base camp, and it was basically the night of the 14th day. I mean, he busted his tail and worked hard, and
got his money's worth.
There's a couple pictures of him when he has his sheep on his pack and his entire camp on his pack, and I mean, I swear the pack is twice as tall as he is.
Wow. Well, that's awesome. Well, it sounds like both you guys had a phenomenal time, and sounds like you had great adventure there at Arctic Red. And I haven't talked to Jonesy, but I'm even more pumped now about my hunt coming up in 18 after hearing all this.
Yeah, no, I would. You're going to have a good hunt. I would. One of the things I didn't tell you, but you should probably just take 2 rifles with you, because it's the same cost whether you check 1 or 2. With customs, it's the same permit fee for 2 guns, and you can just leave one of the guns in camp just in case you had some sort of an issue. And there's a couple other little things that you could do, but that's one of the things that jumped out at me, because both guns were in my name, so we only had to pay 1 fee, and it was like $25 to get the gun permit from the customs in Canada, and it would be worth having too, just in case you had a gun problem, because your guide guns are typically pistol grip shotguns with buckshot and stuff like that, or an iron sight, 300 Win Mag, or a 45-70 or something like that. Just, they're mainly bear guns,
Yeah, speaking of bears, how many did you see?
I saw 7. I think Mike saw 10 or 12, and then I believe one of the guys in camp saw a total of like 16. There's a lot of freaking bears in Arctic Red, and they're not hunted, so they are not afraid of people, and they typically have to put 1 or 2 down on a charge every year at Arctic Red, and at basically every one of the operations up there typically has some sort of a bear encounter every year where they end up putting 1 down. We didn't have that, and I was thankful for that. I didn't really want to have to be chased around by a bear.
What was that one video you sent me? There's a bear and he's rubbing his butt on the ground and he had rooted the ground all out.
Yeah, that was a big boar that had dug a huge hole chasing like a marmot. And it was like a 6-foot deep hole, and he just sat in that hole and just started scratching himself. It was pretty comical.
It's pretty good
but,
video.
They were fun to watch, man.
Well, man, you had an awesome hunt. It's been fun hearing about it. What's next for you?
My wife's got that 23 North early rifle bull tag here in 2 weeks, and so that'll be the next adventure. I think we're going to go up and scout this coming weekend and see what we can turn up.
So you're not going to hunt archery deer yourself?
No, the season is only open for like another 5 days, and I got enough stuff going on. I got to get back to work after being gone for 3 weeks.
Yeah, going to focus on elk, so she's got a great tag, and that's going to be a whole nother exciting time for you guys. Buddy, I appreciate you spending time here with us, and I want to encourage everybody to check out Brian's Instagram page. And what is it, brian.rimza? What's your page?
Instagram's just Rimzsa.
Rimzsa. And I'm going to also feature some pictures that Brian sent me on my Instagram page to kind of promote this podcast. And just congratulate you on an unbelievable trip and 2 great trophies. And that Dall sheep is, if you're only going to go one time Dall sheep hunting and you shoot a ram like that, I mean, it's unbelievable. That's 3/4 of your slam. So, I mean, really, you just have a stone sheep and you'll have shot the Grand Slam, which is a phenomenal accomplishment of someone, you're not very old.
Yeah, I don't know that when or if a stone will be in my cards, but maybe if with a little luck, I'll find a way to make it happen.
I'm sure you will. Well, buddy, awesome having you on. God bless you.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Jay.
All right, buddy. Bye.